Hi, welcome to the week 3 feedback video. I'm Richard, and as you can see, we don't have Craig today. He's off travelling, but we do have our course mentor, Sherelle.
Thank
Hi,
you,
Sherelle.
Richard. It's a real pleasure to be here in the studio and to be able to speak to learners a little more directly this week. And I'm also looking forward to hearing what Craig has to say as our roving reporter this week.
Hi, it's Craig Hassett here, and hello from a long way away.
So once again, lots of really great insights and conversations happening. And what's been great to see is a lot of our learners being very practical and sharing their own experiences, helping one another.
Sure. And the content in week 3 has just been, I think, really practical for managing a busy life, giving lots of strategies. And I know some of our learners are busier than others, definitely, but I think, everyone really had something they could learn about dealing with distractions and procrastination and just getting through daily tasks more effectively.
Everyone seemed to be able to relate to procrastination, Sherelle.
Definitely. And even the course itself was a source of procrastination for one or two learners. And some recognised that they were using the course when perhaps they had other jobs that they could have been doing.
And there's a difference between being mindful and now's not the time to get on with something, like now's the time to get some sleep, or now's the time to do something else, as opposed to avoidance when we know it's the time to get on with something, but we prefer to do something else. And what we'll notice is that when we're actually avoiding, the mind feels agitated. At the end of the event, we don't feel actually better for it. And afterwards, of course, we're even further behind.
And guilt arose for some of our learners as well, telling themselves that they should be doing the course or shouldn't be procrastinating. And of course, if we start to pay attention, we'll notice that very often we're shooting ourselves, and quite often when we're doing that, we end up feeling unmotivated and bad about ourselves. And so perhaps to let go of those, that self-criticism or the idea that we should do something could actually be a really good starting point.
Definitely. I think when you hear yourself saying, I have to do this, or I should do it, or must do it, sometimes just step back, reality check, does it have to be done right now, or is there a bit more flexibility there? I think it's worth doing. Another key topic this week was multitasking, and I think a lot of the learners were really relieved to hear about the myth of multitasking. A lot of people already knew, but a few found out that this is really why they've always struggled to try and do more than one thing at once, particularly at work, but in other settings as well.
Just understanding perhaps that we're not actually multitasking when we're doing more than one complex thing at a time. We're attention switching, and just to understand that basic fact about the way the brain works for a lot of people is a really interesting thing. Maybe gives them permission to not always try to multitask.
Sure.
And of course the experiments that we use in this course as well really shows that very clearly. When we try to do more than one complex thing, we do notice that we're not as effective at what we're doing. We're maybe a bit more stressed. We're not really listening when people are talking to us. So that's been interesting.
And I find, sometimes people think the experiments towards the end of the week they're pretty obvious. They kind of think they know what's going to happen, but sometimes just actually testing it out for yourself, seeing when you're having a conversation with someone and trying to work on your device at the same time, really teasing out, the effects that has on your ability to remember what the person's been saying, even comprehend it in the first place, let alone remember it, the mistakes that people make on the device, switching information, getting confused, typing in words from the conversation. A lot of things kind of really happen that we can tease out a little bit more when we do it as an experiment and see.
Yeah, and it's not always devices as well, just talking to someone and thinking about something else. How often are we doing that? I mean, that's multitasking in and of itself, so just noticing that is also really important. Our learners found it interesting when we talked about dopamine being released in the brain when we switch our attention to something new, and the fact that we've got these novelty-seeking brains, and sometimes just knowing that this is how the brain works can be really helpful. We can start to understand, that's why I'm addicted to constantly switching my attention around, always checking my phone 150 times a day now on average, according to research.
Yes, it's a lot of research about increasing uses of phones we've got to watch. But interesting too, when things are not novel, sometimes we've got to get through jobs that are a little bit boring, a little bit tedious sometimes. Housework, for example, came up, and some people were asking, is it okay to multitask while I'm houseworking? Can I be listening to music or a lecture or something like that to make the most of the time? And I personally think that's okay. There's a difference between, more simple, repetitive tasks and more complex tasks where they're the ones that you really want to watch the multitasking. So there's a difference with, simple tasks, multitasking, and more complex tasks. That's when we want to watch for the multitasking. That said, I think it can be valuable to do those simple tasks sometimes with 100% of your focus. I think
and
that
pleasurable too.
Well.
It's nice just to wash the dishes and just wash the dishes, or to actually taste our food. That's also good. And I think it's a good point actually that you raised, Sherelle, that with mindfulness, we shouldn't set up new rules for ourselves, like I must always focus on one thing at a time, and that's really not the point.
Sure.
The point is to bring some attention, bring some awareness to what we're doing, and just to start noticing, if I'm talking to someone and writing an email, what effect does that have?
Yeah, definitely.
If I'm not paying attention when I'm eating, am I tasting my food, or might I be better off actually bringing my full attention to it? I think that's really the point.
Definitely. And I think it's important to say too, we're not saying that you should be mindful 100% of the time. Default mode, research shows about half of our waking hours we're in default mode. So to expect to be 100% mindful all the time from maybe 50% is not realistic, and it's not really what we're aiming, But the times when, jobs need to be done, the report's due, maybe you've got things to do before school pick up, they're the times to really focus and be mindful, and other times as well. But
And let's see what Craig has to say about that.
One of the things that we might notice about multitasking is, say, well, playing music or doing something else, listening to a lecture while doing housework. Now, we might notice that we're not really listening to the lecture properly, or we're not really paying attention to the housework properly. And there's a kind of, not really a mental rest associated with that. So it can be wise. Having ambient, enjoyable music on in the background, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But, it's paying attention to the housework and give a kind of a mental rest. But mostly we're not paying attention to something like the housework when we're doing it. We're actually in the back of our mind grumbling about, I wish I didn't have to do this, and when's it going to be over, and I've got so many other things to do. So we're not actually really being mindful of the housework. We're actually in default mode, thinking about how I'd rather be somewhere else, some other place, some other time. So to really pay attention, to engage even with mundane tasks, can be a great way of finding mental rest and also reducing the burden associated with doing things like that.
And what about managing multiple tasks? Some of our learners were asking about that. Strategies.
Yeah, people were coming up with really great strategies, working out which time of day they work best. Some people just work best in the morning, some are night owls. I think that's important. Prioritising tasks, working out what's most important and urgent and focusing on those first.
Breaking tasks down as well is very important.
Definitely important. To-do list came up, and that's an interesting
That can go
one.
either way, can't it?
So, for me personally, I do like a to-do list, but I know that sometimes the number of things on the to-do list can be a little bit overwhelming, or people can spend so much time preparing for what needs to be done doing their to-do list that they're actually procrastinating a little bit. So use your to-do lists in a mindful, careful way.
Mindful to-do lists.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Reducing distractions was another key one for getting through a lot of tasks, turning off that phone, reducing
flight
email
mode the
notifications.
phone.
Definitely. That really helps. And, just watching that social media and phone checking during the day can be a challenge as well.
Yeah. And from the simple maybe to the more serious or the more complex, one of our learners asked a question about, how do we use mindfulness when we're facing serious adversity, with bills to pay and not enough money to pay it. And of course, some people sometimes are in very difficult situations trying to use mindfulness to manage that. And there's no simple solution here. Sometimes life throws us curveballs, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can be difficult. And, mindfulness, it doesn't make us pay the bills, but hopefully it helps us see things more clearly and to, plan ahead and to manage that stress and to, come up with a strategy to help get those bills get paid. That can be, really important. I think too, it's about being able to see the situation more clearly, problem solving, planning ahead, all of those things.
Also accepting the situation, just being willing to acknowledge that sometimes life's like that, and that's how things are right now. Everything changes, of course, but the more we accept things and the less we react, as you said, the more able we are to effectively problem solve.
Sure.
And also, of course, next week we'll be exploring self-compassion and how that can be a really helpful thing when things are hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of things being hard, one of our learners did talk about in one of the practices this week, the 10-minute practice, that she had quite a cathartic experience and some tears came up. And particularly as we move into looking at more emotional work next week, I think it's important to remember that, tears are not bad in and of themselves. It can help release some stress. But obviously if anyone's really concerned, and it's ongoing distress, make sure that you're getting some support, definitely.
Yeah. I think there's being with things mindfully. Quite often when we're feeling things, we don't really want to feel it, so we distract ourselves or we avoid it or we judge it.
Sure.
Or we get caught in it and ruminate and get totally caught up in our emotions. But mindfulness gives us the ability to really fully feel what's there, to bring acceptance, to bring self-compassion, and just to allow that to be there and to move through us. And I think that can be a very helpful thing, and that's probably what some of our learners are noticing.
Yeah, definitely.
Stress and resilience. So some...
It was an interesting question that
it was
came
a
up
very
about that
interesting
one,
question, wasn't it? That which doesn't kill us makes us stronger, I guess, is where this question was going. But I wonder if stress really shortens our lifespans, or can it make us stronger?
And they were talking about, soldiers that have gone through a very difficult time, but some of them, live to a very long age. And so she was questioning a little bit, does stress really, impact on how long we can live?
Yes. There's certainly a lot of research that shows that stress creates allostatic load. I mean, it shortens the telomeres, which increases the rate of aging. Yeah. And of course, we know now that mindfulness can slow that down.
Sure.
We know that it has a number of effects on the brain and brain development, shrinking the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, which are the attention and memory areas, and activating and strengthening the amygdala, the brain's fear center. Yeah. So I think you'd say after a certain amount of stress, once we get out of the realms of eustress, positive stress, and into distress, I think there's a fair bit of evidence that learning to manage that's a very powerful thing to do. Sure. So it's probably a case-by-case thing, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think some of those cases where, soldiers have returned and are actually managing quite well, often if you look at what they're doing, they are actually practicing mindfulness. They're practicing acceptance and they're not dwelling on the past, and they're choosing to focus and move ahead. So they might not have been formally practicing mindfulness, but they're using some of those techniques, I think.
And let's cut to Craig.
People cope differently, and of course, post-traumatic stress, the reliving of past events, is very understandable, but it's very important for people who experience those kinds of events to find a way to ground themselves back with the present and to move on from the past. And that's very useful, certainly a skill to learn. But in terms of telomeres, it's not the events, it's how we experience them. For example, there's research looking at people who experience racial abuse and discrimination. And some people who experience that have shorter telomeres and other people don't. And the key factor from the research tends to be whether or not people internalize that discrimination. And if they internalize it, which means brooding over it, getting angry over it, frustrated over it, and so on, in a way that's very intense and prolonged, then that can have an effect that's measurable in the telomeres and shortening the life expectancy. Whereas for those who don't, they might experience the event, recognize perhaps somebody as, the other person might have some problems, etc., but not to actually internalize it in the same kind of way. Then that person doesn't experience the shortening of the telomeres and associated with poor health.
And Sherelle, we've also had some questions from emergency responders. There are lots of paramedics and police doing the course.
Sure.
And interestingly, some of them have noted how, while it's great to do one thing at a time, there are situations where they have to be actually, seemingly doing multiple things, perhaps administering first aid while also responding to a call that's coming in and assessing the scene that they're in. And, sometimes people don't have the luxury of actually just paying attention to one thing. And how can mindfulness help with that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely challenging, but I think the key is to be giving, your full attention on the task that you're doing, and then when something else is coming up, where you can start to give that your attention and coming back. Sometimes you do need to be juggling two things at once, though, and that can be a challenge.
Yeah, and so perhaps just, again, paying attention to the effect, or to where the attention is and the effect that that's having, perhaps minimising attention switching as much as possible. But also it makes me think of some research where drivers in a car who were listening to an audio book had greater impairment than drivers who were in a car with the sat-nav going, with their GPS going, because when it's part of the same task, it's somehow easy to pay attention to two different things. And when it's two separate activities, that's when we start to really see some of the costs.
Sure.
And again, there's no rule here. It's just about noticing what we're doing in each moment and making better choices.
Yeah. And I think, practicing, the formal practice, it does hone our ability to attend fully and not get distracted by the external things that might be around that situation.
Yeah. Dealing with stressful situations can certainly be very difficult, and sometimes when we step into a situation, it could be, for example, paramedic, and to actually start by stopping. Now that might sound a little bit paradoxical, but we're not talking about practicing 5 or 10 minutes of meditation, but just that moment or two, just those few seconds before engaging with the activity, to just stop and just get in touch with ourselves, the state of the body, the state of the mind, to to just have a moment to just sort of come to a point of stillness, to engage the attention, and to then engage with the activity that's in front of us. It can be a very helpful thing to start with a moment of self-awareness, because in that moment of self-awareness we might notice ourselves very anxious or distracted, and that awareness can help us to do something to settle and engage our attention effectively. If we just go on into something and we're not really, perhaps we're very anxious in the background and we just continue to bluster into something, then sometimes that doesn't necessarily help. So that moment of self-awareness, that moment of checking in, being mindful, can be a very helpful way to begin.
And of course, mobile phones and other devices are always something that comes up.
Sure. And technology is great. It helps us to do courses like this all around the world, but we need to put some limits around technology, and particularly phone use. I think it's becoming quite a challenge for a lot of people these days.
Yeah, just first of all, bringing awareness to the way that we use technology, because it's not good or bad, it's all about how we use it.
Yeah, exactly.
And perhaps noticing if we're on our phone a little too much, or if it's causing problems for us, or perhaps training us to be reactive and distracted. And then, as you said, putting some limits around it. Flight moding our phone when we're trying to concentrate on work or study or a conversation, leaving it in our bag when we're out to dinner.
Sure.
Just simple things like that. Getting devices out of bedrooms so that we can wind down at night time rather than impairing our sleep. All of these things. So just perhaps noticing really how we're using technology. That's a good start.
Definitely. And I think sometimes having a digital detox, having a proper break, whether it be a day or a week or a month, people can do a detox in different ways. That can be a really valuable thing to do as well.
Yeah. Formal practice, falling asleep while meditating.
So we had a 10-minute practice this week, which was a big step from the 5-minute practices we've done before. And I think most of the learners really enjoyed that. But a couple did find with 10 minutes it was much easier to drift towards sleep or actually fall asleep completely.
Yeah.
So,
especially when doing meditation. So, if you're finding that you're falling asleep and you're lying down, it's probably a good idea to sit up.
Time to sit up. You could even stand up if you wanted
That's
to.
That's right, or half open
problem.
the eyes. There are a lot of ways of working with sleepiness. And in fact, it's in a lot of the traditional meditation teachings, it's actually seen as a typical obstacle.
Sure.
Agitation on one hand, but also sleepiness and dullness on the other.
Yeah, it's very common. Very common. And I often say, sitting a little forward in the chair can help as well. Not leaning back into the chair can be another quick tip.
Yeah. And on the agitation, of course, on the flip side, a lot of our learners noticing that their minds are really distracted when they're busy, when they're meditating. Yeah. But again, if we start from the place that it's the nature of the mind to wander, like a naughty puppy dog, it just wanders.
Exactly.
Then perhaps we're not so judgmental and reactive when that happens. And if we start from that place, the mind will wander, and mindfulness isn't about stopping that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's about noticing when it's wandered so we can bring the attention back.
Sure.
Just giving ourselves permission for that. A lot of people in our courses say that that's actually a very powerful thing to do.
Definitely. And the more we keep practicing it, the easier it becomes. So it takes time.
Just training that puppy, gently bringing it back, patiently, persistently, over and over again. Yeah.
And we had a lot of learners talking about, really starting to notice some benefits from their formal practice, just rippling over into their daily life. They're just, managing things a bit better, not being as reactive, and that's been really helpful.
Yeah. So that's all from us for now. Next week, we're going to be exploring self-compassion and working with emotions, and this is a week that can bring up a lot of stuff for people.
It can. It's often a really powerful and transformative week. I think it can be really positive, but for some people, the topics can be a little bit sensitive. So just remember to keep going gently, work at your own pace, and if something's not quite feeling right for you, it's fine to leave it for now. You can always come back to it later, or skip it completely if that's what's feeling right for you.
And thanks to our roving reporter. Have a great week yourself, Craig.
I'm going to be out and about, mostly over in the UK over the next month, and working with Warwick University and looking at introducing mindfulness into the medical and other programs there, as well as working with some other universities in the UK and a couple of other special events I'll be reporting on in coming weeks.